This is Jed Disler, and welcome to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. And we are well underway with our mini-series devoted to Beethoven's 32 piano sonatas. This is a way that I wanted to launch our second season that started on January 1st, 2025. Please consider committing to a paid subscription to this podcast on my Piano Maven Substack page by visiting the link provided in the episode description. Paid subscribers not only can access the podcasts, but can also participate in group chats, in group Zoom meetings about everything in the piano world. I've got a lot of goodies planned for you and for us. So while you can access the Piano Maven on just about any major podcast platform, I'm directing your comments and suggestions toward my Substack page, because I think that's going to be the most manageable and time-sensitive way that I can respond to your many comments. If you send comments through the YouTube channel, I will certainly get back to you, but sometimes I don't see a comment on YouTube until way after you've posted it. So I don't want you to think that I am ignoring you, because the whole point of this podcast is for us to have a dialogue about these recordings, and I want to know what you think as well. So we are going through the 32 piano sonatas of Beethoven in numerical order, where I am recommending recordings for each sonata. 2 recordings for each sonata. One is a historic or archival recording, and the other is a modern recording. And the trick is not to repeat any pianist from start to finish in this process. So that means that for 32 sonatas, we recommend 64 recordings in total by 64 different pianists. And without repeating a pianist, that might seem like a big challenge, but it really hasn't been that difficult, because so many pianists have recorded Beethoven sonatas on a very high and world-class level, and excellence really does abound on disc. You really just have to look for it, and to look in unexpected places, as you soon will learn on this podcast. I often talk about my late friend and colleague, the pianist and writer Harris Goldsmith, who, for me, was the best classical record reviewer ever when it came to piano music. And he was my role model in every way. So no Harris Goldsmith, no Jed Disler. So when you read my reviews, and if you like my reviews, or even if you don't like my reviews, that's perfectly fine too. But if you like how I basically write about piano recordings, that's the Harris Goldsmith influence. Also, the late Mortimer Frank, who wrote for Fanfare, was a big influence on me in terms of his writing style. Anyway, Harris often likened the dramatic use of rests or silences and the thematic profile throughout Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 11, Opus 22 in B-flat, as being pure Rossini. And there is a kind of opera buffa sensibility to the writing in this sonata. You probably could set the entire first movement to a comic libretto, and it would be a plausible ensemble number from one of the early Rossini operas, maybe. Or else the minuet could be a ballroom scene where the young lovers are singing a duet. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not going to get started writing a libretto to Beethoven's Opus 22, although it really could be an opera. For my historic choice of a recording of this sonata, I've decided to recommend one of Harris Goldsmith's favorites. In fact, this recording he had personally singled out to me as being special, and he was absolutely right to say so. So my recommendation, or rather Harris Goldsmith's recommendation for an historic Beethoven, Opus 22, is the 1951 mono LP recording by Wilhelm Kempff, and one easily could recommend Kempff in so many sonatas, really. After all, he did record the complete cycle twice, and he made many multiple versions on 78s. But in any case, Kempff approaches Opus 22 with the most supple phrasing and a light and flexible touch and humorous timing, and the way he uses tone color to convey character. Also, the sense he conveys of where the lines are moving and how he follows these lines through to their logical stopping points. The hushed quality that Kempff brings to the first movement's development section really seems to bypass the piano itself into a realm of pure music. When you're listening to this recording, you don't think at all that the piano has hammers. You think that the piano may have lungs instead. Another wonderful recording that is similar to Kempff in some ways, but has a little more metal and steel on the surface and more tooth to its bite, features the late Maurizio Pollini, and he is my modern recommendation. Now, he recorded this sonata twice, once live in 1988, and then many years later in the studio. And I've been on the fence about which version to recommend. For instance, the later studio version is altogether leaner and more compact than in the live recording. His studio first movement is a little faster, but the unison scales are more secure and squarely precise in the earlier live version. The earlier live adagio sings out a bit more. The ends of phrases are sometimes tapered in a vocal manner, which Pollini does not do in his studio remake, which is a little more terse by comparison. In the minuet, the studio version has a stronger and more prominent left hand presence, but I prefer the earlier live version's more pliable shaping of the right hand melodies. So I guess it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But I think I'm going to give the nod to the earlier live 1988 recording because it's a little more expressive and flexible on the whole. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to have both Pollini recordings in my collection, but if I had to pick just one, it would be Pollini live in 1988 for the Sonata No. 11. So for our next episode, we're going to talk about the Sonata No. 12, the Funeral March Sonata, and I think you may be surprised by my choices for that sonata, or maybe not, who knows. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. And take good care until the next time.